I want to ask some questions about the social cohesion funding. To date, how much money has been spent on the $25 million package? How much of that's been allocated and spent?
That's the package, Senator,
to the Palestinian Muslim and other communities.
We'll just get Ms Chatterjee to come up. She's got the details of that for us.
Thank you.
Senator, while Ms Chatterjee's getting set up, I've been advised that the places are outside the 20,000.
Right, okay, thank you.
Senator Sneha Chatterjee, Acting First Assistant Secretary, Citizenship and Multicultural Affairs. So, Senator, as at 30 September 2024, 16.84 million of that package has been committed. And then an additional 5.6 million of that package is going through a competitive grants process that is currently being assessed.
So the 16.8 million that were granted already, allocated already, was that not through a competitive grant process?
Senator, there have been a variety of funding allocations. Would you like me to take you through those?
Yes.
Yep. Senator, 7 million of that funding was for national programs, so combating racism, Islamophobia, reducing misinformation and disinformation.
And just to be clear, for my previous question, was that allocated through a competitive grant process?
Senator, that was done through a direct funding process.
Correct, so just a decision of government.
An ad hoc grant process.
So the government chose the recipients of that $7 million?
With feedback from the department based on engagement with communities and with stakeholders.
Okay.
Additional funding, Senator, $2 million for national programs focused on youth affected by the conflict.
Just sorry, again, before we move on, that $2 million, was that a competitive grant process?
Senator, they were done through the ad hoc grants process.
Right, so again, decision of government to allocate that money?
So, as Ms Chatterjee described it to me, the department engaged with community groups, stakeholders, etc. They prepared options, and the government adopted those options, and that's how that direct funding was made. You'll recall at the time we were trying to operate pretty quickly to get money out.
Okay. And you were going on to talk about a $3 million program or component?
Senator, $3.84 million for local social cohesion projects. $4 million for the...
Sorry, again, on the 3.84, was that a competitive grant process?
So, Senator, the 3.84 was for projects where the organisations may have already existing social cohesion projects in train, where they were contacted by the department to understand if those existing projects could address identified gaps and areas of concern raised by communities.
Okay, so again, it wasn't a competitive grant process?
It may be, Senator, that the original grants process where those organisations had funding
that might have been historically competitive, yep.
Some of those organisations were organisations that had fostering integration grants that were awarded in 2019.
Sure. But the top-up grants they received, there was no competitive process.
It was an ad hoc grants process.
Yep. Okay, ad hoc, thank you. And then you're going on to describe another bucket?
Correct, Senator. So $4 million for the Community Cohesion Support Program, which is for community grassroots organisations, and that's administered by the Social Policy Group. So the department has ran a targeted grants process with the Social Policy Group, who are a peak body, and they ran a competitive grants process through the allocation, through the grant that that the department awarded Social Policy Group. So
the Social Policy Group, that's not part of the Department of Home Affairs, that's an independent group is what you're saying?
That's correct, Senator.
Right, so money was given to this independent group and they determined how it was allocated and they ran their own process to allocate it?
That's correct, Senator.
Okay, thank you. Does that get us all the way to 16.84 or is there more?
So That gets us to 16.84.
And then there's the remaining 5.6, which is a competitive grants process, which is open now, and people are applying and being assessed against criteria. And
so, Senator, the 5.6 million is for Australian, Palestinian, Muslim and Arab communities support projects. That grants process was open between the 18th of September and the 16th of October.
Yep.
There were 160 applications for that grants round received, and they're under assessment by a selection panel. And
so that's a selection panel within the department?
The selection panel is run by the Department of Social Services Grants Hub. The department has an officer who will be part of that selection panel.
Right, and presumably there is criteria which they're assessing those applications against. They'll grade them against those criteria. How will the decision be made who gets to receive those grants?
So the department will, the selection panel will finalise their report, and the department will provide advice to the Minister for announcement before the end of this year.
Right.
The Minister for Home Affairs.
When you say advice to Minister, does that mean the Minister has to sign off on the recommendations? Does the Minister have the ability to disagree with the recommendations, to vary the grants in any way?
Senator, I'd have to take that on notice, but the department is conducting the assessment of those grants in line with the grant opportunity guidelines associated with that particular part of the package.
Yes, and what I'm just seeking to understand, if there's anyone else in the room who has knowledge of this, that would be helpful, whether upon those recommendations being made to the Minister, that's the end of the matter, or whether the Minister then has the ability to vary the recommendations, vary the grants.
Let us look at the way the guidelines have been set up, Senator, and we'll come back to you.
Thank you. That'd be helpful. And I've also read that some groups specifically have been invited to apply, that Assistant Minister Hill has written to some groups and said, you know, you're invited to apply. For which category of funding did that apply? Is that 5.6 or is that a different bucket?
Senator, that's an additional bucket of funding.
Which one's that one?
Senator, in August this year, August 2024, there was 5.08 million for ad hoc grants, which includes 2.6 million for Australian Palestinian-led community organisations and 2.4 million for community services that support youth through culturally informed youth services and pathways for positive community participation.
Thank you. And were either of those buckets of money, the 2.6 or the 2.4, through a competitive process?
Senator, they were through ad hoc grants processes.
Ad hoc grants. So again, it was ultimately the government. In this case, was it Assistant Minister Hill or is it the Home Affairs Minister who was the decision maker to hand out those grants?
Senator, I'd have to take on notice the exact signatory for the allocation of funding. It may be that the department delegated official may sign off on the actual expenditure of the grant money, but I'll take that on notice.
Yeah, I'm less interested kind of who authorised the money to go out the door and who made the decision which organisations were going to receive it, whether it was the Minister and if so, which Minister. So were there any criteria which those grants were assessed against? Any process for determining the recommendations?
Yes, Senator.
What was the criteria?
The Palestinian, the first part of that process, which is the 2.6 million for Australian Palestinian-led community groups. So, Senator, I can take on notice the exact criteria that they were assessed against, but the particular focus was on Palestinian-led organisations who were able to provide direct support to arrivals from Gaza, and this was based on feedback from communities that there was a particular need to support those arrivals through funding community organisations.
Okay. Can I please request on notice the criteria for all of these grant programs that you have? Thank you. Was any investigation done as to whether or not any of the groups who were receiving this funding had previously engaged in any extreme or inappropriate rhetoric?
Senator, the department works with the Department of Social Services Grants Hub, and we undertake due diligence checks for all applicants and successful grantees. So standard processes in line with the Commonwealth grants guidelines and rules. So they assess business, financial and self-declared criminality checks, as well as a review of publicly available information.
Right. So, for example, if a group had posted on social media, extreme content about the 7 October attacks, would that count against them being awarded one of these grants?
Senator, the department looks at the information provided by the organisation.
Mm-hmm.
I can take on notice the full process that we undertook.
Yeah, but this is a fairly important question because part of the rationale for some of this funding was the promotion of social cohesion, and it would be deeply ironic if taxpayers' money went instead to groups who are undermining social cohesion rather than promoting social cohesion. So I'd like to know what due diligence the department or the government did to make sure that that wasn't the case, that no taxpayers' money went to organisations promoting disharmony or extremism.
We can take that on notice.
You're not able to tell me about those processes now?
I think Ms Chatterjee said she'd take it on notice, Senator.
Okay. Well, I want to give you some examples of organisations who did receive funding under these programs who have been involved in promoting extremism. One group is Sydney Community Connect Incorporated. I understand they received $110,000 under the social cohesion grants to Australian, Palestinian, Muslim and Arab community groups. They were given that funding on the 16th of May of this year. On their social media accounts, they have promoted extremist events, including one to be addressed by Sheikh Ibrahim Dadoun. Sheikh Dadoun, of course, is infamous because he addressed the October 8 rally in Western Sydney in 2023, where he said it was a day of pride and that he was elated and it was a day of victory and it was something to be celebrated, what had happened the day before on the 7th of October. He also addressed the rally on the anniversary of the 7th of October at Lakemba Mosque, where he repeated similar things. Another person in this event promoted by the Sydney Community Connect group is Ahmed Basal, who has also engaged in extreme rhetoric and anti-Semitic rhetoric. For example, on his Instagram page, he posted a photo of the Biden cabinet, and next to the names and photographs of each member of the Biden cabinet was a flag, in this case an Israeli flag, and he said in this post, "Jews make up less than 2% of the US population but hold every senior cabinet position in the Biden administration except the Secretary of Defence." And he has some comments alongside that about how terrible it is that Jewish Zionists have taken over the US government. Is that an appropriate person to be receiving a social cohesion grant?
So, Senator, what we were looking for was organisations with track records of supporting their community, those with whom we have worked. We will take on notice the issues that you're raising today and come back to you with more detail on due diligence. Okay.
The Sydney Community Connect has also posted on their own Facebook page a photo with them meeting with Tony Burke. Appears to be in some kind of ministerial office, judging by the photo, and they posted this on the 18th of October. Is it appropriate for the minister to meet with a group that is promoting extremists and extreme events?
Well, it's probably best if I answer that. I mean, again, I'd need to find out what Mr Burke's level of knowledge was about that. You might remember a few weeks ago, Senator Patterson, in question time, I answered questions from you of a similar nature about the United Muslims of Australia organisation, and I pointed to the long history of that group in providing services, mentoring and I think de-radicalisation to young Muslim Australians. So I would want to have a good look at any organisation's track record before accepting the proposition you're putting.
Okay, well I'll provide on tabling that document about the Sydney Connect organisation. Another organisation which received funding was the Lebanese Muslim Association. They received $1.65 million on the 22nd of March of this year. They, of course, were a co-organiser of the rally on the anniversary of the 7th of October at the Lakemba Mosque, at which Sheikh Dadoon spoke, but also our visiting American friend, who subsequently had his visa cancelled after he left, also spoke, and at that rally, said that it was a day of victory and a day of celebration and other things. This is, of course, a rally on the anniversary of the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, which the Prime Minister himself said shouldn't proceed. So again, is the Lebanese Muslim Association, who's involved in promoting events like this, an appropriate recipient of a grant like that?
Well, again, I think from my perspective, and probably Ms Foster's, we'd just repeat what we said, that we'll take on notice those details. But I'd remind you that on numerous occasions, the Prime Minister, Minister Burke and other members of our government have condemned a range of hateful remarks made by a range of people concerning what's happening in the Middle East.
Okay. Another organisation which received funding is Palestinian Christians in Australia. They received $525,000 on the 6th of September. There's numerous photos of them meeting with Tony Burke and other Labor ministers on their social media account. They promoted anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, including that the war was never about Hamas, it's about the Gaza gas reserves. Is this an appropriate group to receive taxpayers' money on social cohesion?
I'll give the same answer I've already given.
Okay, I'll provide that to you on notice for your consideration as well. They also say on their social media, Nazism and Zionism are two sides of the same coin. Zionism is a continuation of Nazi ideology and the Palestinians are the final victims of the Holocaust. Is that an appropriate statement for a government grant recipient?
Same answer as before.
The treasurer of this organisation posted it on Instagram. I can't repeat these words on Hansard because it would be unparliamentary, but she uses expletives about Israel. She said, "It's almost over for you all. The whole world knows. They know you're monsters," and that's putting it lightly, and includes the caption, "Israel is a terrorist state." There's extensive commentary about this from this person about Israel. It was similar nature. Again, comfortable with taxpayer money going there?
Well, again, we'll do some due diligence on that, but I'd repeat the point that no minister in this government endorses any hateful remarks made by any participant in this debate.
She also posted, this treasurer of this association also posted the Al-Qassam logo, a targeting symbol, the inverted red triangle, along with the captions, "You poked, you pushed, you prodded, you provoked, you play victim, you deserve to pay, you parasitic pariah," pretty clearly endorsing violence and terrorism against the State of Israel. Is that an appropriate thing to post?
Same answer as before.
Okay. All right. Well, look, this keeps going on and on. What I should probably do is just provide all of this as a tabled document so that you can assess it yourself, Minister, and the government can assess whether or not they've handed out taxpayers' money for social cohesion wisely. You mentioned specifically United Muslims Australia, and you referred to my questions to you in question time about it, and I have heard from you and from others that United Muslims Australia is a constructive group, and particularly that Sheikh Shady, who runs UMA, is a constructive partner of government and the Department on National Security. But UMA continues to employ Sheikh Dadoon despite his repeated inflammatory comments, which, as you rightly point out, have been condemned by government ministers. So do you think it's appropriate that UMA continues to employ Sheikh Dadoon, given his extreme comments?
Well, again, I'll take that on notice so we can do some fact-checking of all of that. But it's good that you've acknowledged Sheikh Shady as an eminent member of the Muslim community, and I know that he's someone who's met former Liberal Prime Ministers such as Mr Morrison as well.
Yep, I've no doubt about that. But his organisation employs someone who I think we all agree has not contributed to social cohesion constructively.
Well, we'll check all of that and come back on notice. You're
in doubt about whether Sheikh Dadoon has contributed constructively to social cohesion?
No, I'm in doubt. Well, I'd like to check your proposition about Sheikh Dadoon's current employment.
Okay. All right. Well, if you've got an update for me on that, I'll welcome it. But as of very recently, he was still employed. Look, there is a ream of material about other organisations here. I'll provide it all on notice, and I just ask Minister for you to reflect, in light of this, whether you think the government's processes have been adequate in ensuring that taxpayers' money for social cohesion doesn't go to hate preachers or other people inciting discord in Australia.
Is that a question?
Yeah.
Well, the department has gone through with you the process that was adopted, which sounds to me like it involved close consultation with stakeholders, particularly in the Muslim community of Australia. I can only repeat what I've said. We don't endorse any of the hateful remarks that have been made by any participant in this debate. We do, however, strongly support providing funding to organisations to play a role in social cohesion, and we don't endorse some of the divisive behaviour that has gone on within this building to try to divide different groups within our community.
Thank you, Minister. I'll leave this for your consideration, and I look forward to whatever information you're able to provide on notice about these organisations.
Thank you, Chair. The call.